Hello and welcome to this edition of Going Public. I'm your host, Keith Weissite, licensed clinical social worker. Thank you so much for joining us, however you may be joining us. We're always glad to get updates and information from the people who know that stuff. We're very glad to have with us Mr. Henri Poulet.
Yes.
We are very glad to have you. And so, Executive Director for the Morganza Action Coalition and the LA1 Coalition.
That's correct, Keith. I've been serving in both roles for a few years now, but my initial public service is started way back in 2005 with the LA1 Coalition.
Okay.
And I'm going to provide the community today a update on the LA1 project being built, and then we'll talk about also the Morganza to the Gulf project and what the Morganza Action Coalition is doing to forward that initiative.
All right, we appreciate it. And look, with a name like Henri, we know you from down to Bayou. We know you from Larose. So
yes.
Born and raised in Larose, right?
Born and raised in Larose, still down there quite a bit.
Yep.
And
God's country.
It's a pleasure to work for our Bayou region because we all want to see it do well. We want our culture to survive, and we need an economy. We need basic infrastructure in society to be able to live here.
I like it. We need this resilient infrastructure investment. I mean, you're going to tell us a little bit about that in the Bayou region. So, Jen, if you wouldn't mind pulling up that first slide for us.
Yeah, so today I'm going to give the community an update on the LA1 project and on the Morganza to the Gulf 98-mile levee system. And as people know, these are both incredibly large infrastructure projects to keep our community safe and keep our economy moving forward.
Right.
So on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the LA1 project here. People may recall on the map on the left, the LA1 project is a elevated highway from the top of that slide in Golden Meadow. And you could see the blue line of the South Lafourche levee system that ends down in Golden Meadow.
Right.
And currently people cross over the bottom of that levee system there where it says Bayou Lafourche, and they ride along the old highway going down to Leeville, and they get on the new bridge in Leeville in the yellow pictured bridge in Leeville.
Right.
So that was the first half of the LA1 project from Leeville going south down to Port Fourchon that was built a few years ago. So we're now, if we can go back to that slide, we are building the northern portion of the project now that's in green called Phase 2.
Phase 2. Right.
And what people are seeing is the 8.3 miles from Golden Meadow going south down to Leeville, where it will attach to the current Leeville Bridge at that 90-degree curve, that famous curve that everyone has had to take.
Sure.
And it's going to take, Keith, 5 years to build out this project. And I'll show you in a few slides a little video on the current construction, but it is scheduled to be complete by July of 2027. So it's being built, this is 8 miles for $460 million.
Okay.
The winning contractor is a Louisiana company named James Construction out of Baton Rouge.
Okay.
They built part of the southern segment, so they're very familiar with the region.
Right.
You know, they have a lot of people housed in Lower Lafourche that are going to be their crane operators, their cement masons over the next couple of years. While they need to finish it by July of 2027, they could finish early.
Right.
That would be great because then we would have that structure in place before the 2027 hurricane season.
Right, and that would always be the goal, right? So they finish it just a month or two earlier, before June 1st, we're in good standing. And
that would be wonderful because, you know, other than that, we're relying on the old highway that, as you know, over the years, it floods when we have storms come up against it. And it will be a wonderful asset to the region. So, you know, it's going to support many sectors of the economy along the coast going forward for the next generation, whether that's the energy sector, the fisheries sector, ecotourism to get down to Fouchon and Grand Isle.
Sure.
And even the coastal restoration economy, because we're going to have CPRA on behalf of the state doing state projects down there, and you need access. You need to get those dozers down.
And it's going to be so much better access than we have now.
Absolutely.
And it's been 25 years in the planning, and it's going to take 5 years through the construction.
That's correct. So that's going to wrap up by 2027. So I'd like to move on to the next slide that shows you a video clip, a YouTube clip. And what you're looking at, everyone, is you're driving south down the 4-lane in Golden Meadow. Here's where the highway will fork off of the 4-lane.
Okay, very nice.
So you see cranes. Now, these cranes are up in the air on temporary piling, and they're going to build the bridge underneath them.
Oh,
that is
cool.
Building in an environmentally sensitive way, so you don't have to build it from barges. You build it from on top. It's quite an engineering marvel.
No kidding.
And here they're going to continue south in the Levee-Barrow Canal. You see the levee on the right.
On the right, gotcha.
Yep. And coming up is where it's going to cross over the levee and head down to Leeville for 8 miles. So we had to cross over the levee where the Corps of Engineers said that we could cross over it. We're building a T-wall in the levee under the highway, and that will raise that levee protection in that section to 21 feet.
Okay.
And the highway will go over that 21-foot T-wall, and it'll clear at 22 feet.
Oh, my.
That way, Keith, if the South Lafourche Levee District ever gets a federal appropriation from Congress to raise the levees to 20, 21 feet down there, they're at 16 currently.
Right.
Then the section under the highway itself will already be done with that T-wall. And, you know, the highway will not be a burden in raising the levees in the future.
Yeah. And it's so very wise, because I can tell you, historically, in Louisiana, we see these projects where what was done in yesteryear wasn't supportive of the long-range thinking for what needs to come. That is wonderful to see that they're putting that in, and the availability to go to 21 feet.
Absolutely. And, you know, in planning this, we had many, many meetings with the U.S. Corps of Engineers, with the South Lafourche Levee District, with Louisiana DOTD, and with the Federal Highway Administration to say, how do we properly plan this to best serve the community for another 100 years? So that's why the T-wall is being built in, so that, you know, as South Lafourche gets money to raise that system, the section under the highway will already be done.
Wow,
so
very exciting. Yeah,
it's a good thing. And on the next slide, I just wanted to acknowledge that we had so many partners in this. You know, our local governments have helped. The Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, through 4 governors, have been involved in this project. We had private industry. We've named some of them on the slide, but they provided funding to keep our activities in Baton Rouge and Washington, D.C. going, so that we could educate policymakers in D.C. on why LA1 was so important. You know, many people serving up there on the energy committees know of Fouchon and the Gulf, but they had no idea that we had a highway servicing it that Huey Long built in the 1930s to go party on Grand Isle. You know, and in this era now, it's a major energy corridor. So there was some educating to do to policymakers that sit on transportation committees and with the US DOT, saying, look, guys, LA1 at the end of the day services 20% of this nation's energy. And it's very important that we maintain access to the Gulf through Fouchon, because when we have these storms and drilling has to be stopped in advance of a storm, as it is ordered by the Department of the Interior, they have to shut down the wells. The country needs the capacity to get back to Fouchon to reactivate that production 2 or 3 days after the storm does. Because if you don't, you start seeing the cost of oil go up nationally.
Well, it's a financial impact of $500 million per day.
Yes, it
through
is.
Port Fourchon.
It is.
And if people just don't always realize that.
That's
why
right.
that's important. And so LA1, very, very important to continue for what we need for commerce, for oil and gas, and for the country.
Right.
20%.
And also, I think it's going to play a tremendous role in alternative energies. The U.S. Interior Department is looking at federal leases in the Gulf for wind.
For options, right?
When companies are going to want to bid on a big wind project that might cost them $1 billion, they're going to say ahead of time, how are we going to service this?
Right.
Well, they already have partnerships with vessel companies out of Fourchon that are servicing their deep water drilling activities, and they can say, hey, we can work out of this dock. So
how we can make it work.
Exactly.
And so very, very important. So the LA1 project moving forward, anticipation 2027, hopefully finishes before hurricane season that year. So really good information. We're going to talk a little bit about this Morganza Action Coalition and what you're seeing and working on right now.
Absolutely. If we could go to the first slide on Morganza, that would be great. What I'd like to talk about is the entire system, Keith. So in yellow, you're looking at the 98-mile alignment of the Morganza to the Gulf Hurricane Risk Reduction System. And it's basically an alignment that includes levees, locks, floodgates. And at the end of the day, Keith, it's going to protect 200,000 residents and businesses from the 100-year storm flood.
Right.
So notice that on the right, it connects in green to the South Lafourche system.
Right.
So it's really, attaching to the South Lafourche system, it's going to make our whole region a lot more resilient to hurricane flooding. We should not have the flooding that we experienced, back for Rita and so forth.
Yeah.
And we're getting support from Congress now. The system achieved its first start in 2020.
Right.
We were one of 7 levee systems in the U.S. applying for our core designation that received it.
They got it.
That was huge because from now on, the Corps will fund 65% of this project.
Which we've been funding on our own.
Which we have for years.
Our parishes have been doing that.
In our state have put in $1 billion on this alignment.
Right.
So going forward, it's very important that the Corps be engaged on this. So moving to the next slide, I'll show you who the partners are here. And so our federal partner is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Right.
Our local partners are both the Terrebonne Levee District and the North Lafourche Levee District. Right. And our state sponsor is the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority.
Right.
So moving on to the next slide, when people in D.C. say, why Morganza to the Gulf? And it's because this system is going to provide the needed 100-year storm surge protection for 200,000 residents, and it will enhance our entire workforce resiliency. Why is that important to D.C.? Because this area strategically is important to the nation for energy security, for the seafood we produce, and for ecotourism as well. It's a bigger economy than we all know of. So, as things change on the world market for oil and gas, and we're seeing that happen with Russia, with the war going on, the Gulf becomes even more important because at the end of the day, again, it's providing 20% of the nation's energy. And to keep the Gulf resilient, you need a workforce that is resilient.
Right.
And to keep that workforce resilient, you don't want to have the workers you're relying to go back into the Gulf and activate energy having had a flooded home. So Morganza to the Gulf is going to be tremendous in doing that, making the workforce more resilient. And moving on to the next slide, with every administration in D.C., they have different priorities.
Right.
And acknowledging that the Biden administration is looking at how they can put 40% of the overall benefits in investments in climate and clean energy to communities that are disadvantaged.
Okay.
They want to put 40% of that money into disadvantaged communities. So they're calling it the Justice 40 Initiative. Well, when you look at the Morganza to the Gulf alignment and you say it will benefit people in these census tracts, and you look at the stats on the 2020 census, it is truly benefiting people who are disadvantaged. We have over 20% of our residents in poverty, 24% are minority population, which the Biden administration wants to help out.
Right.
And when the other scoring is, how does our community score when nationally, when you look at our risks from natural disasters? Well, without Morganza, we're vulnerable to storm damage. We're vulnerable to the point of being 92nd percent in the nation to our buildings being vulnerable to destruction, and 95th percent in loss of life. So we're conveying this. The Pentagon is aware of it through the Corps of Engineers, the Office of Management and Budget, the White House is, and with that, we're getting investments that are historic, that are going to be made in Morganza. There's $400 million coming for the project, and it's going to build significant levels. But as well, we're conveying to them on the next slide the environmental benefits of building the Morganza levee system. And when you look at these two photos, they're taken from the exact place 9 years apart. And this is on the inside of the levee. And the reason the dead marsh on the left has come back to fruition to the photo on the right in 9 years is that the system can stop large influxes of salt water going into the marsh and killing our freshwater marshes. So, you know, when you have hurricanes come with a surge of salt water, we're able to close off the system and protect those pristine marshes. Now, Terrebonne Parish hosts one of the largest eagle populations in the nation. We're conveying this to Washington because, you know, the American eagle is a treasured thing for our nation, right? And everyone loves it. And so we're providing an example of how an environmentally friendly levee system can support that. Foster that.
I saw a bald eagle in downtown Houma this week.
Yes, so it's happening all over.
It's wonderful.
So moving on to the next slide, you know, Morganza to the Gulf is going to be a winner for our community, okay? There's a lot of activity happen. I talked about this New Start status in 2020. We're now an official Corps project. That was very competitive to get. We were one of 7 New Starts given nationwide. So, and again, it comes with the 65% Corps payment from this point out. Also, number 2 there, $1 billion in local investment already made by our parish governments, our levee districts, and CPRA. There is no other levee system in the U.S. that has this level of local matching funds provided. Then in fiscal year 2022, our federal year, we were able to be successful on a $19 million earmark. And for fiscal year 23, we have applied for a $31 million earmark to build another section. We think with the changes in Congress coming this January, that $31 million will be successful too. And we have our Congressman Steve Scalise and Garrett Graves pushing for that hard.
Yes, they are.
I also mentioned to you the fourth point here, $368 million in IAJA funds coming. That is the bipartisan infrastructure bill.
Right.
Those funds are going to be used to build 6 segments of Morganza that we feel we're most vulnerable in.
Right.
So we had a strategy meeting with the levee districts, CPRA, and the Corps, and we said, here's what we want you to build first. And part of that is going to be the floodgate in the intracoastal in LaRose, because if you remember for Ida last year, we had 50 homes flood in northern LaRose that we never had before.
Right.
So every storm is different, and we're seeing that we have different vulnerabilities that we have to address first. And then over the years, we'll raise those levees to 18 feet. It's going to take time. Because
Sure.
when you build a levee, you got to let it settle, and a few years later, you come back.
You can add on to it.
And if we could go back to that slide for one last point I want to bring out, we have a record $15 million in state appropriations coming this year.
2022.
In 2022. And I want to say we're very grateful to our state legislative delegation.
Sure.
They're very committed to this project because they want to see this happen for the community.
Right.
So, thank you to that entire delegation of the Bayou region in Lafourche and Terrebonne that support the capital outlay request. It's very important. And then finishing up on our last slide here,
We're not done yet, right?
Yeah. I want to leave everyone with a photo of what will be the Home and Navigation Bubba Dove lock. As you know, on the left, the floodgate is already in place.
It is.
The lock structure on the right will allow vessels to come in when that floodgate has to be closed due to high tides. So
Oh,
the
that's
lock will
fantastic.
perform its mission as a true lock.
Around the gate.
Around the gate. So the lock contract is going to bid, I believe, in January coming, like 2 or 3 months. It's going to be a $400+ million public bid process.
Right.
So you're going to see contractors in the region working on that. And we'd like to invite companies to join the Morganza Action Coalition. Please get in touch with me. My email is at nicholshenri.boulay@nichols.edu. We'd like your support. We'd like individuals to support it too.
Very good.
With that, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. And thank you very much. Some wonderful information. Thank you for the updates and the specifics of where we've been, where we're going, and our vision. So
Yes.
thank you so much, Henri.
Thank you, Keith.
All right. And that will do it for this edition of Going Public. Don't go anywhere. A lot more local programming here on HTV.